primarily the combustion of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas, have been the primary cause of climate change. Fossil fuel combustion produces greenhouse gas emissions that serve as a blanket around the planet, trapping heat from the sun and increasing temperatures. We continue to advance this episode from the last episode of Climate Change Part 1, which was released last week. Many different ways that climate change is affecting people's lives and health. Clean air, safe drinking water, a plentiful supply of nutrient-rich food, and a safe place to live are all at risk, and it may undo decades of advancement in world health. Do we read and have different reactions to climate change? Climate change may have an impact on our work, housing, safety, and ability to grow food. Some of us, such as residents of small island states and other developing nations, are already more susceptible to the effects of the climate. Long-lasting droughts are putting people at risk of starvation, while conditions like sea level rise and saltwater intrusion have progressed to the point that entire communities have been forced to evacuate. The quantity of climate refugees is anticipated to increase in the future. We ask again that, is every rise in global warming significant? Thousands of scientists and government reviewers concurred in a number of UN reports that keeping the increase in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius would help humanity avoid the worst climate effects and maintain a habitable climate. However, present strategies predict a 2.8 degrees Celsius rise in temperature by the end of the century. All across the world, emissions that contribute to climate change are produced, yet some nations create significantly more than others. 3% of global emissions are produced by the 100 nations with the lowest emissions. 68% of the contribution comes from the 10 countries with the highest emissions. Everyone must act to address climate change, but those who contribute most to the issue and those nations have a higher duty to do so. Despite the enormous issue we confront, are we aware of numerous options? Numerous approaches to combating climate change can boost the economy while also enhancing our quality of life and safeguarding the environment. In order to direct development, there are also international frameworks and agreements in place, including the Paris Agreement, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Adapting to climate impacts, reducing emissions, and funding necessary adaptations are the three main types of action. By switching from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources like solar or wind, we can cut the emissions that cause climate change. But we must get started immediately. While an increasing number of nations have pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, it is necessary to achieve around half of those reductions by 2030 in order to prevent global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or less. Between 2020 and 2030, fossil fuel production must decrease by around 6% annually. Do we pay the debt now or will pay dearly afterwards? Every individual needs to answer themselves. Governments and corporations must make large financial investments in climate action. But ignoring the climate costs even more. In order for poor nations to adapt and transition to greener economies, developed nations must fulfill their pledge to give them $100 billion annually. Climate change, its causes and consequences. Fossil fuels, which include coal, oil, and gas, are by far the biggest cause of climate change, contributing more than 75% of all greenhouse gas emissions and almost 90% of all carbon dioxide emissions. The heat from the sun gets trapped on Earth as a result of greenhouse gas production. Global warming and climate change result from this. The rate of global warming is presently higher than it has ever been. Weather patterns are shifting as a result of warming temperatures, which is also upsetting the natural order. This puts both ourselves and all other kinds of life on Earth in grave danger. We try to understand the various causes of climate change. Producing power. Burning fossil fuels to provide power and heat accounts for a sizable portion of world emissions. Burning coal, oil, or gas still supplies the majority of the world's electricity, which produces carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, two potent greenhouse gases that cover the planet and trap the sun's heat. A little over a quarter of the world's electricity is generated by renewable energy sources including wind, solar, and other natural resources, which, in contrast to fossil fuels, create very little to no greenhouse gases or other air pollutants. Producing products. Emissions from manufacturing and industry are mostly the result of burning fossil fuels to create energy for the production of items like textiles, electronics, plastics, cement, iron, and steel. Gases are also released during mining and other industrial activities, as well as during construction. Some products, including plastics, are manufactured from chemicals derived from fossil fuels, as are many of the machines used in manufacturing. These machines frequently run on coal, oil, or gas. One of the leading global producers of greenhouse gas emissions is the industrial sector. Destroying forests. Cutting down forests to make way for farms, pastures, or for other purposes increases emissions because when trees are felled, the stored carbon is released. An estimated 12 million hectares of forest are burned annually. Destruction of forests reduces nature's capacity to keep emissions out of the atmosphere because they absorb carbon dioxide. A percent of the world's greenhouse gas emissions are caused by deforestation, along with agriculture and other changes in land use. Fuel utilization. Fossil fuels are typically used to power cars, trucks, ships, and aircraft. As a result, emissions of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, are greatly influenced by the transportation sector. Due to the internal combustion engines used in road cars, which burn petroleum-based fuels like gasoline, they make up the majority. However, emissions from ships and aircraft are still rising. The majority of carbon dioxide emissions related to energy come from transportation. In addition, statistics suggest that over the next few years, energy use for transportation will rise significantly. Generating food. In addition to deforestation and clearing land for agriculture and grazing, digestion by cows and sheep, production and use of fertilizers and manure for growing crops, of energy to run farm machinery or fishing boats, typically with fossil fuels, all contribute to the production of food, which results in emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases. Due to all of this, food production plays a significant role in climate change. Additionally, food distribution and packaging also contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Building energy. Over half of all electricity used worldwide is consumed by residential and commercial structures. They continue to produce a sizable amount of greenhouse gas emissions since they use coal, oil, and natural gas for heating and cooling. Energy-related carbon dioxide emissions from buildings have increased over the past few years as a result of rising energy demand for heating and cooling, rising air conditioner ownership, and increased electricity consumption for lighting, appliances, and connected devices. Excessive consumption. You can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by changing the way you live, how you use energy, what you eat, how much you throw away, and how you move around. The same may be said about the use of products like clothing, electronics, and plastics. Private households are responsible for a significant portion of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Our way of living has a significant impact on the environment. The richest 1% of the world's population together contribute for more greenhouse gas emissions than the lowest 50%, hence they suffer the biggest burden. Thanks for watching and giving your valuable time. Please like, share, comment and subscribe to keep our motivation going. Cheers.